Okay, let's turn to 1 Samuel chapter 18. 1 Samuel 18. This chapter really marks a turning point in the relationship between Saul and David. Things are going to go south really fast, but it also marks the beginning of another relationship, and that's the friendship that David has with Saul's son, Jonathan. And then there's another relationship that's going to form in this chapter, and that's David's marriage with Saul's daughter, Michal. And it's not Michael, okay, it's Michal. I should call her Michelle, just so there's no confusion. But so a lot of relationships forming and breaking in this chapter. So if you have the New King James Version, it titles 1 Samuel 18, Saul resents David. So David and Saul have a falling out, and really it's just that Saul becomes paranoid and then he tries to kill David, and I think we can call that a falling out, can't we? But as we go along and look at this chapter, I just want to challenge you to view it this way. View David and Saul as two examples. One cares about and is interested in loving God, serving God, obeying God. The other, Saul, he just cares about himself. So these two men, in that way, represent two paths. Two ways to live your life, two paths to walk down. So we obviously want to emulate David and not Saul. So we're going to look at this chapter and the things that result from it. So let's listen along. 1 Samuel 18. We'll listen to the whole chapter.
Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him go home to his father's house any more. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David, with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now it had happened, as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced, and said,
Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him.
They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom?
So Saul eyed David from that day forward. And it happened on the next day that the distressing spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied inside the house. So David played music with his hand, as at other times. But there was a spear in Saul's hand, and Saul cast the spear, for he said,
I will pin David to the wall.
But David escaped his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence, and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Therefore, when Saul saw that he behaved very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. Then Saul said to David,
Here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles.
For Saul thought,
Let my hand not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him.
So David said to Saul,
Who am I? And what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?
But it happened at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel the Meholathite as a wife. Now Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. So Saul said,
I will give her to him, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him.
Therefore Saul said to David a second time,
You shall be my son-in-law today.
And Saul commanded his servants,
Communicate with David secretly and say, Look, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now therefore, become the king's son-in-law.
So Saul's servants spoke those words in the hearing of David. And David said,
Does it seem to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing I am a poor and lightly esteemed man?
And the servants of Saul told him,
In this manner David spoke.
Thus you shall say to David, The king does not desire any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines to take vengeance on the king's enemies.
But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to become the king's son-in-law. Now the days had not expired. Therefore David arose and went, he and his men, and killed 200 men of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full count to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him Michal, his daughter, as a wife. Thus Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went out to war. And so it was, whenever they went out, that David behaved more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name became highly esteemed.
I don't know about you, but if I were David, I don't think I'd want to be Saul's son-in-law. Have any of you ever had a father-in-law that's threatened to kill you or tried to kill you? I didn't say wanted to kill you, I said tried. Probably not. This is a bad situation, but let's start at the beginning, verse 1. Chapter 18, verse 1 starts out with the great friendship between David and Jonathan. It says, Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. That's not a term that you hear very much. What's it saying? I mean, they were really close, obviously. So the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. So what do you think it was that turned them into such great friends? You know, why now? Because they've known each other, presumably, for a little while at this point. What explains it is to go back to chapter 14. So if you followed along with this study, you remember in chapter 14, remember that time Jonathan and his armor bearer, they attacked the garrison of the Philistines and they killed 20 men, just the two of them. So obviously Jonathan is a bold, brave warrior. And when he sees that David by himself killed Goliath, he said, this guy and me, we got something in common. So once David kills Goliath, Jonathan notices that, and I think that's really what brought them together. They were both fearless warriors. So let's turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 4, but they become very close friends. Very close. Okay, in verse 2, as you're turning there, verse 2 in 1 Samuel 18 says that David, from now on, basically, he's living with the royal family. They make a covenant, David and Jonathan do, and they give each other gifts. So they're a team from now on. This is going to serve David well in the future. Now, I'm just going to bring this up. I'm not going to say much about it, but today, in the perverse age that we live in, liberal scholars from some of the mainline denominations, you can probably guess what they do with this relationship between David and Jonathan. So, and it's not even worth bringing up except to say that, a lot of liberal scholars try to make this into something that it isn't. But that's so absurd. Again, it's barely worth bringing up. Just sort of a sign of the times that people would even try to insert that into the story. But Jonathan and David, their souls were knit together. I mean, they're like brothers from another mother, as people say, right? Look at Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, because this all speaks to the importance of having godly friends. It's important to have friends, but it's really important to have friends that also love the Lord. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, it says, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So we've all heard the expression, 2 are better than 1. Well, that comes from this chapter right here. But then it goes on to explain what are the reasons for that. Matthew Henry wrote this about the threefold cord. He said, where 2 are closely joined in holy love and fellowship, Christ will by his Spirit come to them. Then there is a threefold cord. So if you think of it that way, I know when a lot of couples get married, they have that, those ropes that you tie together. One represents the husband, the other the wife, and the third cord represents who? The Lord. And that's really what binds not just married couples together, what should bind them together, but also friends. So it just, again, speaks to the importance of having godly friends. Because when you have a friend, a close friend who's a Christian, you don't just have a shared belief in, the same God. It's a shared belief in the way, a shared, outlook in the way you view the world, right? The way you look at life and the meaning of life, the purpose of life. Our faith should touch really every area of our mind, our whole being. So being like-minded regarding Christ and all things pertaining to Christ and Christianity, this is really important. Proverbs 27, verse 17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. So we need Christian friends to encourage us. We need Christian friends to counsel us, to challenge us, and even to hold us accountable. Because if you have a friend who's maybe of the world, they're not going to hold you accountable in living a godly Christian life. But having a really close Christian friend, they can do that. And that's something that's very beneficial. Something I've noticed as a pastor, if a person starts going to church, but they don't have a lot of Christian friends outside of church, rarely do they stick around. But if a person has many Christian friends in their lives, Christian friends and family members, that just brings so much extra stability. Not to say that a person can't do it. I'm just saying, generally speaking, it's something I've noticed. So who your friends are, this is very important. We can all think of, kids, especially young people, that having the wrong friends can lead them in the wrong direction. That can happen with adults as well. So having Christian friends, so vitally important. So I realize David and Jonathan don't call each other Christians. I realize that term isn't, there yet, but that's the way we're looking at them. Sort of a picture of just 2 great friends who are believers. So Jonathan will be a great friend to David and vice versa. This isn't going to be an easy thing, though, because we already saw what happened in the chapter. Jonathan's father, Saul, now he despises David, so that's going to be difficult. But who is Jonathan more loyal to? Is Jonathan more loyal to his father, the king, or to David? David. Why is he more loyal to David?
His soul is knit.
His soul's knit, but it's because of God. If his father, the king, were the godly man, then it would be natural to be more loyal to your father. He should be, and if all things were equal, but it's because David is a man of God, so that's definitely part of their relationship. And even after Jonathan dies, if you know the whole story, David will then look to show honor to that friendship because he will seek out one of Jonathan's relatives, Mephibosheth, and he will show kindness to him because of Jonathan. So, the great importance of having Christian friends. You say, well, I don't really have too many Christian friends. Well, a friend must show himself friendly. So go out of your way and be friendly, and if you don't have them now, you'll make them. Okay, 1 Samuel 18, verse 2. You can go back to 1 Samuel 18. David is not going back to his father's house. So David's life as a shepherd, it's probably been over for a little while at this point, but now it's official. David is not going back home. His time tending the sheep is over. You could say that David has been drafted into the military because Saul tells him, you're not going home, kid. You're staying here. But I think that's okay with David. David wants to serve God, and just the dispensation they're living in, given the situation, this is how you serve God at this point, or at least it's one way to serve God, by fighting for God's people Israel. So verse 5, David is sent out on a mission or several missions. David is making all of the right decisions. The Lord is with him. He's getting victory after victory after victory. Sometimes you read the Bible from one verse to another, one chapter to another, and you don't really know how much time is passing. Like sometimes it seems like, oh, well, this is the next day or something. Well, months could have gone by. We don't really know how much time is passing. Certainly after David defeated Goliath, he is an instant celebrity. Like everybody in the nation knows who David is now. But now he's really able to prove himself, to demonstrate that he's not just a one-hit wonder. David is acting, he's proving himself as a warrior, and he's getting national recognition that, he's just battle after battle. He is growing in fame and popularity, and that leads to this. So verse 6, it says, "And it happened, as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments." So notice this isn't just one woman. I don't even think this is just a group of women. It's like this song is being sung in all the cities. It seems like this is spreading all around. And what's this song that they're singing? Well, it tells us, verse 7, "So the women sang, and they danced, and they said, 'Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.'" Now here's the thing, that probably isn't even true. I mean, given the time that Saul has been king and been a warrior, and the time that David's been in the military, I highly doubt this is even an accurate statement. What is it then? Well, it's possible, but I think it's probably the women. David is, remember how many times it says he's good looking? I think the women of Israel are just falling in love with David, and they're just singing his praises. And when Saul hears this, instead of being happy for David that, hey, my right-hand man is really doing a great job, Saul hears this, and what's his response? Yeah, he is angry. He is envious. So now Saul, his instant concern is that David could have the kingdom. He has all the hearts of the people. Now, the only thing left for him is he could stage a coup. I mean, this is the way Saul is thinking. If David wanted to, he could take power. So Saul says in verse 8, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they've only ascribed only thousands. I mean, he's pretty upset about this. So David has popular support. And now, is this true? Was David really planning to, stage an overthrow of the nation? No, this is not. It's not going to happen. Even when David later on has that opportunity, does he do it? No. So Saul, he's really just imagining all of this out of thin air. Why is that? People who are bitter and envious, they can cook up all sorts of things in their mind that aren't even real. I think that's this situation. Saul is really unbalanced, right? Like later on, we talk about the story where he tells David to go out and get 100 foreskins. What is that all about? Like, this is not normal behavior. So David wasn't interested in doing any such thing, but Saul, that's what he's worried about. He can't be happy for David. He craves all the attention and praise for himself. So remember, these two men as examples. David, the man of God, serving God, obeying God, and Saul is just obsessed with his own self. He needs to be the center of everything. So these are sort of the two paths that people follow. Either serve God or serve who? You might think it would be either serve God or serve the devil, but hardly anybody in the world said, I'm going to serve Satan for my life. People, really what they do is they serve themselves. It's what I want to do. But if you're not serving God by default, you're not serving God. So we should ask ourselves, though, considering Saul's response being envious, how do we respond when we see somebody sort of outshining us? If somebody is blessed beyond measure, something really wonderful happens to somebody else. Maybe you wanted that thing. You wanted that thing to happen to you, but it happens to someone else. When we see other people blessed, do we rejoice with those who rejoice? Or do we get angry and we're upset because how come I didn't get that thing? Do we respond that way? See, if we're honest, sometimes you at least have those thoughts that, how come this didn't happen to me? So we should learn from this. Envious people, here's the thing, envious people tend to look at other people's wins as their losses. Is that true, though? It's been said that life isn't a zero-sum game, right? Just because somebody else wins doesn't mean you lost. This really is a win-win for Saul. David is a great warrior. He's in Saul's army. This is a good thing. But no, that's not the way Saul sees it. So instead, verse 9, it says that Saul eyed David from that day forward. And it's because of this ungodly behavior and attitude. I think it's the direct result that we see this in verse 10. And it's because it says it happened on the next day. So no detail in the Bible is just there just because. I think there's a reason. So the very next day, what happens? Remember that evil spirit, that distressing spirit, that demon? We think this is probably a demonic spirit. All of a sudden, the demon comes back. And it says the distressing spirit from God came upon Saul. And then this interesting detail says he prophesied in the house. See, in the past, we've seen people filled with the Holy Spirit, and then they prophesy. But now you see that people can be filled with a demon, and they prophesy when they're filled with a demon. This is just a thought that just came to my mind. When we went through the series on the cults, and there are these charismatic leaders who out of nowhere, just some random guy from New York or whatever, all of a sudden he has this following of thousands of people, and they're just enthralled and listening to his every word, his preaching. And is that what happens when cults form? That these people are actually empowered by a demonic spirit? I don't know, but it's possible, because people that are possessed, or at least afflicted here, influenced with a demonic spirit, says that Saul prophesied inside the house. So what does it mean to prophesy? To one of two things, either to foretell right? Or to foretell. So the fact that Saul is prophesying, it doesn't mean that he's predicting the future. That's one thing it could mean. But basically, Saul is preaching. He's in his house and he's preaching. And probably what this is, it's like the rantings of a madman. Saul is now a tyrant. He's acting unhinged, and who knows what he's saying. He may be declaring things about God and God's will that aren't even true, but it says he's prophesying. So what do? When Saul is afflicted by this evil spirit, what's the solution? Remember his team, they figured out, what are we going to do when Saul's like this? Call for David. So okay, that's the last thing Saul needs, really. So David shows up to soothe his soul with his music. And it says, so David played music with his hand as at other times. But there was a spear in Saul's hand that day. So here's what Saul is thinking. Well, David can't have the kingdom if he's dead. So here he does. He throws the spear or the javelin and he says, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped his presence. Not once, but how many times? Twice. So somehow, it's like Saul had him trapped. He should have been dead, but David escaped. I'm reminded of the story in Luke chapter 4, remember when Jesus went back to his hometown? And it said the crowd seized Jesus and dragged him out of town, and they were just about ready to throw Jesus off a cliff. And then it says, he passed through the midst of them and went his way. It's like they had him, they got him, they're going to throw, and Jesus just walks through the midst. It's like a supernatural thing. I don't know how that worked, but it did. And maybe that's what happened with David. Either way, David, you realize David is untouchable right now. David is chosen by God. He's walking in God's will. David is untouchable. Nobody can do anything to David. There's only one man who can mess up David's life right now. And who's that? David himself. And that's, and he does do that later on. And that's sort of a lesson for us. And I realize we don't know the hidden counsel of God, but the safest place to walk is where? Yeah, right smack in the middle of God's will. If you're doing the right thing by God, that's the safest place to be. So again, David, right now, he is untouchable. Isaiah 54, verse 17 says, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. So as long as David is doing the right thing, he's safe. And then it said, the thing that keeps getting repeated in this chapter, the thing that Saul is realizing more and more and more, is that the Lord is with David. Look at verse 12. Now Saul was afraid of David. Why? Because David was bigger than him, stronger than him, mightier than him? Nope. Yeah, he was afraid because the Lord was with him. But the Lord had departed from Saul. So I think Saul is recognizing this. Now, the right thing to do would be to repent and humbly ask David's forgiveness and start doing the right thing. But does Saul do that? No, he doesn't want to admit he's wrong. He's stubborn, stiff-necked, so he's going to continue on the road that he's on. Verse 13, therefore Saul removed him, David, from his presence, and he made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Therefore, when Saul saw that he had behaved wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he went out and came in before them. So Saul, to promote David after trying to kill him, I don't know about you. What's your take on this? To me, this seems crazy. Saul tries to kill him and, let's make him a commander in the military. Does that seem like a rational? To me, that doesn't seem reasonable. Why would you do that? Ray?
He sends him into the worst part of the fighting.
Yeah.
Sends him to get killed.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else have a different thought?
Keep your enemy close.
Yeah, well, that is one thing I thought of. Yeah. What's the saying? Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. That's a quote from The Godfather, right? But I don't know if it's... Now you're going to think I'm worldly when I watch The Godfather. But, I'm sure that's a well-known saying from history. It is a strategy, but really he wants David gone. Like, I don't want David around, so we're just going to send him out on the battlefield. And I think Ray's right, because he sort of alludes to this later on, that if David's out on the battlefield all the time, guess what? The chances of him getting killed are going up. But really, there's no chance of that, because why? The Lord is with him. Okay, so David, because he's now a general or whatever, a high-ranking military man, now he's out there winning victories, and he's just climbing up the ladder, right? He's becoming more and more loved by the people. He's now being viewed as like the nation's top military man. Not only is he not killed in battle, this really helped solidify his position among the children of Israel. So Saul, I think in a moment of clarity, he realizes he has to do something. He has to try to repair things. Because whatever Saul is thinking, whatever he's trying, it's not working. So how do you repair a situation like this? Well, if David's my son-in-law, that's got to help things out, right? So Saul offers David his daughter. Look at verse 17. Then Saul said to David, "Here is my oldest daughter Merab, and I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." Like, that takes some nerve to say that. Like, this is what David has been doing. But for Saul thought, let my hand not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. So, in other words, if I kill David, Saul realizes, if I kill David, I'm going to look bad. Everyone's going to turn on me, so I can't touch him. Hopefully the Philistines will get him. But, if you did want to try, just in case that doesn't work, if you do want to repair relations, it helps to have him married to your daughter. So this is something that kings would do, royalty. Even today, I'm sure it still happens. If there's two nations and they want to have peace, then the daughter of the king will marry the prince of this king over here. And, when Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines, you think, wow, that's a little excessive. But a lot of that was probably, establishing relations between nations. So that's a very common thing, like I said, that still goes on. So that's one part of it, repairing the relationship. But this whole idea, hey, I will give you my daughter if you fight the Lord's battle. What's the problem with this? Let's think back to the last chapter. What's the problem? Saul has already promised David his daughter, right? Wasn't that the agreement? Whoever kills the giant gets my daughter her hand in marriage. And then David kills the giant, and guess what? No daughter. Okay, so what is Saul doing? He's reneging on his promise. So this is another thing that shows you who Saul is. He's not keeping his word. Verse 18. David responds with humility for this offer. So David said to Saul, "Who am I, and what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? Not too long ago, I was just a shepherd boy. Nobody even knew me. Who am I to be the king's son-in-law?" So I suppose you could look at it this way. The way I read this at first, David's just, no, I don't deserve this. Like, I do not want to be in this situation. So he's sort of giving an excuse. But I don't know that's it, because he does accept the second offer. So I guess that's not it, although that's what I would probably try to do. So Saul does offer his other daughter, and this time David agrees. So when David fought Goliath, remember, he wasn't really doing it for the wife. David was doing it. Why? David was I don't want to say he's looking for a fight, but he was looking for any opportunity, again, to serve the Lord. This is how David was serving God, by fighting against the enemy, and he was gifted to do this. So I think part of it, when Saul gives this offer, okay, you can have Michal, but you have to go out and kill 100. He's just looking to kill 100 Philistines. I think that's really what David is interested in most of all. But look at verse 20. He jumps at the opportunity. Verse 20, Michal, Saul's daughter, it says, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. So Saul said, I will give her to him. Why? So even now, Saul is, okay, I offered my daughter, I'm going to do the right thing. No, he has some other motive, that I will give her to him that she will be a snare to him. Now, what is a snare? Yeah, it's a trap. It's like you're luring David in. It's like bait. So what's the bait? Well, I'm going to send David on this mission, and I don't know why Saul thinks that this mission is going to get David killed, but that's his reasoning. So verse 21, Saul said, I will give her to him, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, you shall be my son-in-law today. And notice it's a back and forth through messengers, right? Saul and David are not on speaking terms. They have to send messengers to go and relay the message. So look at verse 25. Then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king does not desire any dowry. Oh, thanks, because you owe her to me, right? Saul is unbelievable. But the king does not desire any dowry, except he does. 100 foreskins of the Philistines to take vengeance on the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So Saul doesn't think that David is going to survive. I think part of it is, this is a bizarre thing. This was not a common thing to do in battle. So what's David doing? He would have to disfigure the bodies of the Philistines. And the other Philistines are going to find their bodies and see what the Israelites did to them. So even if David survives it, they're going to want to seek revenge because he's like mutilating the corpse. So Saul figures either way, this is going to put a target on David's head. I think that's why Saul did it. And so, again, he's deranged too, so that plays into it. Because this is a strange thing, right? But Saul is a strange guy at this point. But this is one of those stories where, atheists, critics, skeptics, they read the Bible. What kind of book is this? With stuff like that. And here's the thing about a story like this. Because some people maybe are bothered by this story. Just because something's in the Bible, it doesn't mean God approves of it. Right? There's a difference between passages of Scripture that are descriptive and passages that are prescriptive. So this is just describing, it's descriptive, it's just telling you the details of what happened. Saul, the madman, told David to go out and get 100 foreskins. It's not prescriptive. God isn't telling the Israelites to go out and do this, right? You see the difference? The Ten Commandments, that's prescriptive. God is saying, thou shalt do this. But that's not what this is. So it's just telling you what happened, nothing more. But David does go out, and instead of getting 100 foreskins for Saul, maybe he really liked Michal after all, because he thought she was worth 200. So he goes out and he gets 200. Also, it's another way of confirming that the Philistines were dead. Right? Because David wouldn't do this because he was an honest man, but he could come back and say, I killed him, but how does Saul know? So you would have to take something back to show that you actually killed them. So that plays a role. But verse 28, thus Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, and Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul became David's enemy continually. So even though David did what Saul said, it just made him hate David that much more. So in starting to wrap this up, I thought of James chapter 1, verse 8, that says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. I think that really describes Saul right now. He loves David, then he hates David. He's trying to kill David, then he wants to make peace. Later on, he's going to kill him again, then he's sorry. It's just back and forth, back and forth. So we can see sort of the insanity of the king's behavior, not just because we're removed from it, we get to read in this book and see that it's clear. No, we see his insanity because we're in church, we're reading the Bible, we're hearing from God, we're seeking to follow Christ and understand the importance of humility and honoring and obeying. We see this for what it is. Does Saul see it? No, to Saul, this is all normal. And for the person, how does Saul get in this situation? One sin led to another, to another, to another, and now he's doing super bizarre things. But people who keep getting deeper and deeper into sin, the Christian can look at them and say, what are you doing? You're destroying your life. The decisions you're making are not making any sense. We can see that, but for the person who's in that situation, it all seems normal. So, in conclusion, this is one of the reasons why we need to continue walking with the Lord. If we sin, we need to confess that right away, repent of it. Don't go down this road, because there's two roads in life: doing things God's way, doing things your way. And Saul is doing things his way, and we see the result. We'll close with verse 30. It says, "Then the princes of the Philistines went out to war, and so it was, whenever they went out, that David behaved more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name became highly esteemed."